once we have our hypotheses set up, that determines what type of test that we're going to be running. Okay, when we are doing hypothesis testing, there are three types of tests. There is what we call a left-tailed test. There's what we call a right-tailed test. Oh, sorry. Or a two-tailed test. My tongue will say it today. Okay. And what determines whether we have a left-tailed, a right-tailed, or a two-tailed test is the symbol that shows up in our alternative hypothesis. If we're trying to test the idea that the population mean is truly less than a number, then that's a left-tailed test. If we're testing whether or not it's greater than that presented, that conjectured value, then that's a right-tailed test. And if all we're saying is, well, it's either equal to this number or it's not, then that's a two-tailed test. Okay, so the inequality symbol in the alternative hypothesis is what determines our test, that type of test. Okay, so if we have mu not equal to a number for our alternative here in this first example, that tells me that I'm looking at a two-tailed test. On this second one, since the alternative hypothesis is that the mean is greater than a number, that would be a right-tailed test. And on the third one, if we're testing the alternative that mu is less than a number, that gives us a left-tailed test. So once we have our hypotheses set up, then we'll do a statistical test by using sample data. Remember, parameters are things like mu and sigma and p, but we usually only have sample statistics to deal with, like x bar or s or p hat. Okay. So we'll use those sample statistics to quantify some things. Okay, I know I'm speaking very vaguely right now. And then we'll decide whether or not we believe we should reject the null hypothesis. Okay. So just extremely basic outline of what we'll do is we'll do a statistical test. Okay, and we'll find something like x bar if we're dealing with mu's for our hypotheses. Okay, we will, I'm going to use the words compare it to some values that we'll talk about how to find in the next video. And then we'll make a decision. Now, our decision is always one of two things, and we always speak in terms of the null. We're either going to reject the null hypothesis, or we're going to say we're not going to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, we don't ever use the word except. Okay, if we do not reject the null, okay, it's kind of like accepting it, but we don't ever use the word except. Okay, we either say that we believe the null is wrong and we're going to walk away from it, or we say the null is not wrong, so we're not going to walk away from it. When we draw a conclusion or when we make a decision, there are always two correct ways we can make a decision, and there are two ways that we can make a mistake. Okay. There are going to be some slides posted in the links in the modules tab. I'm going to try to get this all in the right order when I post it. That has a diagram there, and it has an example, a qualitative example, but still one that hopefully will sink in and make sense about how there's two ways to make a right decision, and there's two ways to make a wrong decision. And each of those have names that you'll need to go to your book or look at those slides for. Okay. When we're doing a hypothesis test, just like when we were finding confidence intervals and that sort of thing, we're going to be given a level of significance, and that will be told to us in the problem. It very much parallels how confident we want to be. In the next video, we're going to talk about the critical regions, non-critical regions, and how to use our tables for our tests. And then I think we should be able to get that covered all in one more video. And then next week when we regroup, or on next class when we regroup, we can put these pieces together, and it'll make more sense when we start doing actual examples.